This is the new Peugeot 408 GT Hybrid. It's a car that's a coupe SUV with rivals such as the BMW X2 or even the Range Rover Evoque. Now those are very tough models to go up against, but this has pretty strong credentials. Not only does it promise to be ultra efficient, but also it has some good looks that are mixed with a very sporty drive, or so Peugeot promises. So today we're going to find out if we can live up to those expectations. Before we hit the road, don't forget to check out cinch.co.uk or download our app when searching for your next car. Now first things first, I am a really big fan of this car's design. I wouldn't have thought I'd be, because it's a coupe SUV crossover thing, and those are three things that really shouldn't be mixed together, but somehow Peugeot has made this 408, especially in this high rank GT trim, look very good indeed. It's sharp, it's sporty, and it's quite handsome. And it's certainly very different from its rivals, not least because cars like the BMW X2 or the Mercedes GLA, well, they take a much more traditional form when it comes to the crossover design. This promises to be a bit more interesting to drive because of the way it looks, so let's find out if it is. Now the powertrain in this car is familiar from several other models in the PSA group, which this Peugeot brand is part of. It's a 1.6 litre turbocharged engine up front, and then in the boot you've got a 12.4 kilowatt hour battery, giving you a hybrid setup.
I should add that the car we're driving, a hybrid 180, isn't the most powerful version of the 408 GT you can get. Peugeot also offers a hybrid 225 version, which is 0.3 quicker to 62 miles per hour without compromising on overall efficiency. But naturally, it costs a bit more, starting from £44,850.
Now this is both a plug-in hybrid setup, so a proper long-distance hybrid car that you can plug in at the charger, and it's also a self-charging machine because the engine can turn into a generator when you change the modes in the drive selector. But really, this car is targeting drivers who want to take advantage of very efficient petrol usage. You can do, Peugeot claims, 40 miles in purely electric mode, which we are driving in right now actually, and it is very capable in that setting. It's certainly quick enough, there's a nice elastic delivery of power. It's not quick like an electric car, but it's nippy enough, easily nippy enough to keep up with traffic, even up to motorway speeds. But really, this car is best when it's left to its own devices, especially if you use the built-in sat-nav, because then it will be able to calculate where you're going and where it should make use of either petrol, electric, or both. And when it's doing that, it's actually very good indeed. The engine and electric motor work really well together. They're nice and smooth. You can still feel that this car has 8 automatic gears because there is a slight hesitation, but as soon as the gear is selected, you get a nice smooth delivery of electric muscle, and then the petrol engine picks up. So it feels effortless, and it feels like a much bigger engine than that 1.6 litre up front because of the electric assistance. And importantly, especially for long distance drivers or even company car buyers looking for the cheapest tax rate when it comes to hybrids and efficiency, well, this car comes with a claimed miles per gallon efficiency of over 200. So 217 miles per gallon is on the spec sheet combined. But that is, of course, in WLTP testing. In the real world, you might be able to achieve that when you're cruising through town in purely electric mode and then just dip into petrol now and then. But if you're on a longer journey where you have to stay on the motorway, you're going to get a much more realistic miles per gallon. Something much closer to the efficiency of a diesel is where this car is actually at. And that's a very good thing indeed. And I can see, if I check the stats here, that we're getting on this current drive 42.7 miles per gallon, which sounds rubbish, but I've been driving it quite quickly and I just had my foot down a few seconds ago. On the motorway here, I was in the 60s, so that's good fuel economy.
That said, if you forget to plug the 408 GT in and decide to charge up its battery on the move, the engine will start to drink more fuel as it works to top up your electric range while also still doing the driving. That is not an efficient way to use the 408's hybrid setup.
There are some times when it might be relevant to do that. For example, when I drive back into the city tonight, I might prefer to use a bit more fuel on my country road and motorway drive home. And then when I get into the city and I'm driving past people and kids and everyone else in the city, I don't want to be polluting at all. So then I'll have charge so I can stay in electric mode. So if that's how you think about your driving, it is a useful feature. But really the best way to use this car is to plug it in at home.
Talking of the city, while the 408 GT is barely shorter than a BMW 3 Series at just shy of 4.7 metres, it's actually pretty easy to drive through urban streets, as my morning commute confirmed. The seating position gives a commanding view of the road, while the door mirrors are nice and chunky, so you can spot curbs. Admittedly, the view through the rear window is narrow, but a high-resolution reversing camera more than fixes that issue.
And also you've got cross traffic alert as well. So if I'm reversing and a car's coming from either side, the car will ping at me and say, no, something's coming, but you haven't seen it yet. So that's very useful. It's very easy to drive. And even on the motorway, the driver assistance features, that cruise control and the adaptive cruise control are very effective. The powertrain is pretty quiet and it allows you to notice that there is a little bit of road noise actually in this car. It's got big 20-inch wheels, which look excellent. I love the design of them, but they are definitely a lot of rubber against the road, and you're certainly aware of it. There's a bit of road noise, and it does feel a bit sporty as well. The ride is a little bit firm, especially at lower speeds. It seems to smooth out with speed, and when you get on the motorway, actually, I didn't really notice the ride at all. But in town, and now we're doing 50 miles per hour on this B road, I can feel the ridges and the cracks a little bit more, which suggests it should handle pretty well. And certainly the way the car looks and some of the marketing Peugeot attached to it suggest it should do as well. So let's find out. Let's put it into the sport mode. You only get electric, hybrid or sport, which is nice and simple, and you can't change the settings between the engine, the gearbox and the suspension. The suspension's always the same, and the engine and gearbox just get adjusted depending on the mode you're in. So let's put our foot down here. Now there was hesitation from the gearbox there. Interestingly, the electric motor really moved me out of that roundabout, but then when the engine started to accelerate, it wasn't in the right gear. So it's a bit hesitant there, but handily you do have these shift paddles behind the steering wheel. So let's give the car the benefit of the doubt and give it a bit of a notice to say, I want to come out of the next roundabout with some acceleration. So I've clicked that into second gear. Let's see how it pulls out of this corner here. Yeah, that's pretty good actually. It really does feel elastic. It feels like there's a lot of muscle, and I think most of that comes from the electric side of things. But then the petrol engine can pick up and keep up that momentum. There's no hesitation or dip in performance. Even from low speed, putting your foot down, again, it really does feel quite quick. And now I've noticed the gearbox in sport mode is changing much faster as well. Certainly when you leave it to its own devices in sport and you have your foot down, the car accelerates quickly and the gearbox changes quite nicely as well. Although on the downshift, that's the one area I just wish it would drop down the gears a bit quicker in sport mode. So I think it really forces you to use these paddles, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if you like driving, but yeah, that's probably one minor weak point. As for the ride at speed, well, I said the car felt a little bit better on the motorway and it seemed to smooth out some of the imperfections, but on this bumpy B road, it feels fidgety even at speed. There's definitely a sportiness and a sporty edge to everything. You find yourself noticing bumps that you hadn't really seen, but there is definitely lots and lots of grip. I mean, this car is only front wheel drive, and yeah, okay, 180 horsepower and 360 Newton meters of torque isn't exactly mind-bending stuff, but it puts the power down very well and means that the car doesn't feel loose or uncontrolled. Now, it's good news when it comes to the interior of the car, because despite this not feeling like the sportiest machine out on the road, inside, and especially up front, it does feel premium and quite sporty. Peugeot has brought its iCockpit layout to this 408, and that means you've got your dual screens up here and a pretty sporty driving position as well. This is a long car, but you've got this small steering wheel up ahead here, so it feels a bit more agile on the road, and also it clears up a bit of space. Now, the layout of the dash is very familiar from other Peugeot models, and even looks quite familiar to some stuff you'll see from Vauxhall and other sister brands in the parent company, but in the Peugeot, it feels especially sporting. Now, you've got this wide infotainment screen up here, which works really well. Now, there are no physical buttons to control it, it's all touch, but actually, there are some handy shortcuts down here, and it works and responds really quickly, like a smartphone. I have nothing bad to say about it, although I would prefer if the climate control was managed by some manual switches here, just to save time, but actually, to be frank, it's not that difficult to press the button down here and access it. Same goes for when you're switching between navigation or Apple CarPlay, which, by the way, is wireless and standard, along with Android Auto. So it's very easy, very functional, and it looks really good as well. Same goes for the instrument cluster ahead of you here. It's a nice design, the features are cool, it's actually a bit 3D as well, there are different layers to the display, but the classic Peugeot problem has arisen here again, and that is that I have to have the steering wheel a little bit lower than I would like it to be in order to see all of the graphics. It's worth doing that because it looks great, but I'd like my wheel a little bit higher. Not the biggest issue, and I'm sure most people probably wouldn't notice it, but for those of us who are really obsessive about driving position, that is a small negative. That being said, the cabin elsewhere is really good. You've got lots of storage space, little storage space down here for your key, you've got a couple of cup holders here, wireless phone charging up there, another place to put your phone if it's your passenger's phone, and USB-C charging, and then you've got room as well, big cup holders down here, and the seats are very comfortable. You've got part leather in this model, and they're very supportive, comfortable and adjustable as well. So as far as the interior goes, this car feels every bit its 45 and a bit thousand pounds value. And in the back, the first thing you notice is just how much legroom there is. There is so much knee room ahead of me here. This is definitely one of the most spacious cars in the class by a big margin, even compared to the more SUV-shaped cars. You really get a good amount of knee room in this vehicle, although because it's lower and sleeker in the roofline, you don't get as much headroom, although there is still plenty, I would say, certainly for somebody who's under 6 foot. I'm just under 6 and I fit in it pretty comfortably actually. The seat as well is really nice, and you still feel like you're in a premium car, not least because you've got a couple of USB-C ports down there to go with your 2 vents. When it comes to the middle seat, you do of course lose the headroom because you're sat a little bit higher. So I am now grazing the top of the car here, so it's going to be snug as a 5-seater, and that's also true when it comes to width as well. So think of this as a 4-seater that's nice and spacious, especially when it comes to legroom, and it feels sporty because of that. It feels like a long GT car when you're sat back here, which is pretty cool. There are of course some practical features, not least you've got your cup holders down here, and there's a ski hatch through there as well, so you can put skis or whatever you need to poke through here. So it does work in the family functional sense as well as in the premium sporty sense. Now when it comes to space in the boot of the car, because it's got a long wheelbase, you have actually got a decent amount of length to use. In fact, it is definitely one of the biggest in the class when it comes to the gap between the back of the car and those rear seats. Although, because this is the hybrid model, you don't get much when it comes to actual depth. Now you have got a bit of space under here, but most of that is taken up by the charging cables, and the space you probably expected to be further forward is taken up by the hybrid system's battery. Also, because this car has that swoopy, stylish roofline, you don't have masses of space up here. An SUV would carry on up here, wouldn't it? But this thing curves down. So if you're putting, for example, a plant in a pot in this car, it's going to have to go that way, not that way. So that might be an issue for some buyers. Although, because it is so long, when you fold the seats down ahead, and you can do that by just pulling these levers here, you actually have a nice long boot, one of the longest in the class. So if you're storing things that are lengthy rather than tall, this actually might be the best car for you. So I think it's probably quite clear that I have a lot of good things to say about the 408, especially in GT hybrid form. I think it looks great, and I think it definitely stands out versus its slightly more upright rivals. It's got lots of legroom in the back, and the interior is a really nice place to be, even if the seating position isn't bang on when it comes to me. But I think on the road, it doesn't quite hit the nail on the head when it comes to the sportiness. In fact, it doesn't feel sporty at all. It just feels quick and capable and definitely very efficient, but it doesn't feel exciting at all. And I guess for some buyers, that might be a bit of a disappointment, especially if you're considering other cars with maybe an M trim badge on it as well. But this Peugeot is definitely different enough from the crowd to appeal to a specific type of customer. I think anyone who wants to stand out from the crowd or be different, or maybe isn't quite on board with getting into an SUV but does want a slightly higher ride, well, this 408 definitely feels like a good car. And when it comes to the powertrain, it is definitely capable and very efficient, but it's not that interesting. But does that really matter in this class? I don't know. Let us know in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the thumbs up button, and of course subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll be back with more cars like this and some stuff at Rockingham as well.